Welcome back to the Ultimate Mixdown. So we've laid down our foundation and our rhythmic section with the drums and the bass guitar. Now it's time to get into the electric guitars and the acoustic guitars. Let's get right to it. Now, so far we've been focusing on the rhythm instruments, and a lot of the time the kick drum, the snare, the bass guitar, they're all set to the center channel. So I've only recorded one take of the bass guitar, or ultimately it's going to come down to just one track for the bass guitar, dead center in the mix. With electric guitars, we'll record 2 tracks so that we can pan them a little bit left and right, and that leaves some room for the vocals to sit in the middle of the mix while we can still hear the electric on the side. At some points in the song, I may pan the electric guitar to the center, if it's during a solo or a riff or something that you want the listener to focus on. But for the most part in this song, the electric guitars are supporting the main element, which is the vocals. So make sure you turn off record arm and input monitoring on the bass guitar. Now that we're going to be working on the electric guitars, we can create a new track for that. And we'll call this E guitar 1. And make sure that record arm is on and input monitoring. And I've switched out my bass guitar for my electric guitar on input 1, so I'll leave that as is. Okay, and we should be able to hear that now. So in this case, I'm going to record a pass-through recording on this track, and once I get it to a point that I like it, I'll go and do another take on a separate track. Now, a few things to keep in mind when you're recording guitars. You want to make sure you have your strings tuned. I know that's a very basic thing, but tuning guitars after the recording process is a very difficult task, and one of the best things that you can do with recording is making sure that you get the best sound and the best take right up front. Oftentimes people rely on the mixing process to fix something that should have been corrected in the recording process, and sometimes it might not even be something that you can fix, and then you'll have to re-record the take when you're trying to focus on mixing the project. And along the lines of tuning the strings, a lot of people, when they record a new song or a new EP or a new album, they'll actually replace the strings. Make sure you play on those strings for a little bit so that they settle in their tuning. Once you've done all the setup, making sure that your guitar is plugged into the hardware and you have record and input monitoring on, we're going to go over to the mix panel and just make sure that we get the correct levels for the guitar. So again, I'm shooting for that -12 to -18 dB on the guitar track now. So this would be a good level to record at, but I'm going to place it up just a little bit higher since we have a little bit more headroom to work with. And make sure you're checking those levels against your strumming pattern in the loudest part of the song. Once I have the level set, the last thing I want to do is pull in those impulse responses that we had used on the guide track. I may switch them out later, I may switch out a cabinet or something like that. But at least at this point, I can have the guitars sounding like real electric guitars even though I'm recording directly into the interface. If you're using a microphone to record your electric guitar amp into your interface, I also highly recommend recording on a separate track a direct input for your guitar so that if you need to switch anything out or if you want to use a different sound, there's plenty of options available for software when it comes to amp simulations and impulse responses. So it's just another tool at your disposal in case you don't like the sound that you recorded in from your amplifier, you wouldn't be stuck with it. So let me pull those over from the guide track. Again, what I'm using is Ignite Amp's Emissary head. And then I'm also using the NAD IR impulse responses. And what this allows me to do is load impulse responses for certain amps and cabinets. So my guitar can sound like it's coming through those amps and cabinets and getting a very similar tone as if I was recording directly from them. The last thing we want to do is make sure we have the levels set on our electric guitars so we can hear it along with the bass guitar and the drums. Okay, now that we have our guitar track set, we can go ahead and record. Again, recording by clicking the record button on the playback, or Command R on a Mac, or Control R on a PC. You can set a metronome to count off, and also count off while you're playing the song, but I like to use the feel of the instruments that I've already recorded, so I'm going to leave the metronome off. I'm going to record, and I'll come in at bar 2 when the rest of the music does. Alright, and once you have one guitar track recorded, then you go ahead and do the same process and record a second one. And you can even play along with that first one as a guide. Okay, so once you have the rhythm guitars recorded, the next thing you could do is record a track for any solos, or if you have a couple of solos with harmonies, you could record a couple tracks for that. I might put in one little solo in the bridge, but I also have this rhythm pattern that I'd like to play along with the bass. Okay, so this is the section right here that I'd like to add a little rhythm pattern to from the guitars. So let me add a new track. And I'll do E guitar 3, or I could say bridge. Okay, again, record and input monitoring are on. The guitar is coming through input 1. Now I'm not going to start recording right at the bridge. I need a little time to get into it. I'd like to listen to a few bars to feel the groove. So I'll start maybe halfway through the riff, or I could even start at the beginning of the riff that goes right into the bridge. Okay, so record and input monitoring on. Set your playback where you need it to count you in for a little bit, and then start recording. And then because this is a rhythm guitar, I'll create one more track and record the same thing so that I can pan both of those tracks a little bit out from the center. And this one I'm actually going to record with just the bass and the drums so that I get that rhythm feel coming in through this rhythm guitar. Alright, now that we have all of our electric guitars recorded, the last thing we're going to record is a little piece of an acoustic guitar part right at the bridge. Now this guitar is a little different. I could plug the acoustic in for that electric acoustic sound, but I'm going more for the natural sound of the acoustic guitar, so I'm going to use a microphone to pick it up. You can get away with using an inexpensive dynamic microphone like a Shure SM57. You could use a condenser microphone. A lot of the times those can sound a little brighter. They also pick up a lot of the room sound, so if you're in a very small room or in a very large room, just keep that in mind. So to set up for recording the acoustic guitar, instead of having a line input in your interface, you're going to have an XLR cable, and that's going to connect to a microphone that you're going to pick up your acoustic sound with. Make sure that the input on the interface is on instrument or mic instead of line. And also, if you're using a microphone that requires phantom power, like many condenser microphones, then make sure that you have phantom power on, or on some interfaces, it's a 48V button or slide that needs to switch on. And then what we're going to do is we'll set up our microphone so that it's about 6 inches away from the acoustic guitar. You can try different types of mic placement, different distances from the hole. Just keep in mind that the farther away from the source that you are, the more that the mic is going to pick up the room ambience. You can test it out by having the mic directly facing the hole, or you can have it just off center. You can also test it out by moving the mic up and down the neck of the guitar. Sometimes you might just want the reverberation from the strings up the neck. I tested a number of mic positions, and the sound that I'm going for this one is just slightly off axis on the center of the hole. So where I'll place my mic is going to be right at the base of the neck where the neck meets the hole. And then I'll angle the mic just slightly towards the hole, and I'll keep the distance to about 6 inches. So before I do that, I'll set up the acoustic track, again creating a new track. Now I'll do a couple acoustic guitars so that I can pan those as well. The input is still going to be input 1 because I switched out my line input with my XLR cable on input 1 of my device. I'll set up the mic positioning, I'll set up the levels of the acoustic guitar, and then I'll get right into recording. Okay, and with the acoustic guitars, we have all of our guitars recorded. We started with bass, we added on electric guitars, we added some additional rhythm guitars, and we also added an acoustic guitar part near the end here. So the next thing that I like to do is I like to tighten some of this up. So if I recorded multiple tracks, I'll pick the best pieces of each track and bring them all together. If I need to re-record any sections, I will. And then once I get the instruments to a place that I like, then we can move on to the next video, which is recording vocals. If you'd like to see a more in-depth video on how to record acoustic guitar, or if you'd like to see a more in-depth video on how to edit the guitars, let me know in the comments below. Thanks again for joining me in this video. Stick around for the next one.